Could be a huge investigation, could be nothing at all. We'll talk a little bit about this and also about the movings and shakings of the NBA with a guy I've not talked to in way too long from Bleacher Report. Also from this area, proud UC Davis Aggie grad, currently living, it says in his bio at least, in Brooklyn, New York. The one, the only Howard Beck. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning, Dave. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Is that Wikipedia? We always check the Wikipedia entries, and it says you're living in Brooklyn. Is that accurate, Howard?
I have nothing to do with the Wikipedia entry, but that is accurate. I do live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and very happy to be doing so.
I had a feeling, and we talked about this at the open of the show when we were promoting you as one of our guests coming on. I had a feeling you might not have anything to do with your Wikipedia entry because you're listed, and the very first line, Howard, and in quotes, "What up, Beck? Beck." Is an American sports journalist. That is actually in bold as part of your name. I figured maybe that wasn't your handwriting.
No, I don't know who might have done that. I don't know who's done any of it, frankly. So thank you, people who have given me a Wikipedia entry and edited it and put in the "What Up, Beck" line, because that's hilarious.
It's Zach Lowe's fault,
yeah.
I say.
I'm sure Zach's spending all his free time on Wikipedia, editing entries. If somebody out there is enough of a fan that they did that, that's awesome. Thank you,
Howard. Sam Amick is in England. I know our friend Mark Stein is going to be going on vacation soon. You hold on a second. That's bleeding in, guys. Thank you. I know that you, I believe we talked yesterday, we'll be taking some time off, but really in the NBA and in the business of covering the NBA, it seems like every time there's about to be a lull, something else pops up. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it's really funny. Like I often say, and I'll tell my editors, especially those who are less familiar with the off-season rhythms, and I'll just say, listen, I'm usually going to check out, and by now I'm usually I would have done what my buddy Sam Amick had done. I would have been out of here by now. I haven't quite gone on vacation yet, but normally by about the third week of July, you can rely on the idea that the major free agents are all off the board. Most of the big business is done. No one, most of us, at least on the national level, if I were covering a team, it's a little different. But at the national level, it's like by the time we're getting down to teams signing their 12th man or two-way contract, who cares? Right. I'm done. I'm out. I don't need to be here for that. But the NBA is just off the rails now. And, granted, it's been almost 2 weeks or about 2 weeks since the Russell Westbrook deal. And that was probably the last major piece of the summer. But Kyrie Irving was traded in August a couple years back. I was on top of a mountain, literally on top of Aspen Mountain in Colorado when that happened. And years back, Dwight Howard was traded in August. So, yeah, to an extent, we can never really assume anything can't rest. But my gosh, we all just have to check out at some point. All props to Sam for getting himself and his family off to London. My first vacation is going to be slightly less glamorous. I will be in Sacramento. So
I disagree. I think that's more glamorous. What are you talking about? And I can tell you right now, Howard, it's too bad you're not out here as we speak. Just so you know, it'll be 103 today, 105 Saturday, and 106 Sunday.
Look, nothing is going to top the heat wave we just had here in New York.
That's true.
Where it was like 100 and the real feel was 110, but it was all because of the humidity, and it was just absolutely disgusting here.
I want to make clear before we dip our toes into this. I'm just a ding dong on the radio. Howard's a capital J journalist. He knows what he's doing, and there's a lot of conjecture out there. There's not a lot of solid information, but I did want to speak to you about this NBA investigation. This fascinates me. Because I think, as I said earlier, it's the worst kept secret in sports, maybe, that the free agency rules are circumvented. I guess I'll start with this, Howard. What I don't understand is Adam Silver ultimately works for the owners. They have the final say. They are the board of governors. Why, in what world would team owners want to potentially hamstring themselves and punish themselves? They're the ones that would control the investigation. Does that make sense to you that they would, in fact, agree to investigate their own wrongdoings?
So there's a lot to unpack there. let's put it this way. The owners, the NBA is a partnership, right? These are 30 owners of 30 separate franchises that are in some way independent businesses, but they're a cartel. They are all in business together.
Yeah.
They have to agree to a shared set of rules and regulations. Otherwise, it's just chaos. It's the Wild West. And they don't want that. So the NBA has a massive book of bylaws, which they all agree to adhere to. They're not adhering to them. They're flagrantly violating their own rules. And, in past years, tampering's been around forever. Has tampering gotten worse in the last 5 years? Absolutely. Some people around the NBA feel like we reached yet another new threshold here in terms of the June tampering season, with the Al Horford having kind of already agreed to a deal, I think on draft day, the day before the draft, somewhere around there. That was a different threshold. There's always been teams having conversations with players in the 24 hours or the couple of days leading up to free agency. There's always been a lot of stuff going on, and there's always been whispers throughout a season where it's team talking to an agent of a player where we're having this conversation with this agent, and he represents one of our guys, but he also represents a star that we're interested in. And you're not supposed to have the conversation beyond that, right? You can talk to the agent about the player who's already on your roster, but not the other guy that he represents that is not under contract to you. But that's where things get skirted all the time. Hey, by the way, we've got cap room this summer. Is your guy interested? That stuff has been happening forever too. But what went off the rails this summer was 1,000 deals, it seems like, already having been made long before June 30th and, in mid-June. And now even the teams themselves who have been violating these rules are alarmed that other people are violating them worse or earlier or more flagrantly. And so what's happening is, yes, they're all guilty and they could all be pointing fingers at each other, but they all have to come together and decide, do we have rules or don't we? If we're going to have them, can we enforce them? How are we all going to hold each other accountable? It's not necessarily Adam Silver having to wrangle all these owners. It's the owners having to confront themselves and decide whether or not they actually believe in the rule of law.
Well, as Howard Beck joins us from Bleacher Report, sticking with that half of the possible investigation, a lot has been made about, well, how can you possibly enforce this? You can't monitor player cell phones. Kawhi Leonard could talk to Kyrie Irving, could talk to Kevin Durant, could talk to Draymond Green at any point during the year, and there's nothing anybody can do about that. But I'm not necessarily sure. I'm a little confused here. Can ultimately, in your opinion, could the NBA, if they were so inclined, could they tighten things up to the point of making a real difference when it comes to monitoring and enforcing the rules amongst ownership and front offices?
Well, there's a couple different styles of tampering, or maybe there's a whole variety. Player-to-player discussions, David Stern essentially carved out an exception for that verbally 9 years ago at Summer League during his address to the media after the Board of Governors meeting. In the wake of the LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh union in Miami, and there were all the reports that they had been discussing this for a while, and Stern at that time said, listen, we can't govern this. We can't tell players not to talk to each other. And so he just kind of out loud created this exception that, I don't know if it had always existed or if it just was that was where the barrier broke, and they decided on that one, there's no way we can do anything about it. And so since that time, it's always been kind of understood. Players can recruit each other. Players can have discussions. They just can't do it at the direction of their teams. So the GM can't go to his star and say, hey, convince your buddy to come here. But if the players want to talk to each other on their own, that's allowed. That is essentially kosher under NBA rules. It's teams, owners, GMs, coaches, anybody who's an actor of the team, an employee of the team, going and trying to have these discussions with players or their agents before they're actually free agents that crosses a line that the league is actually interested in. But again, it's only tampering if somebody files a charge. There can be all the rumors in the world, all the reports in the world. The league's position, again, has always been, hey, if these guys want to complain to you guys in the media off the record anonymously about all this tampering going on, tell them they have to actually file a complaint, because we can't act unless they actually ask us to act, because that's the way the system works. And the reason nobody does is because the second anybody points the finger, they're going to have one pointed back at them.
Howard Beck of Bleacher Report joining us. We're talking about this potential NBA investigation into violating free agency policies, deadlines, etc. The other part of this investigation, I mentioned that this half. The other half or quarter or whatever it may be, if it even is, was this line from a note that I found fascinating. Also focusing on whether improper inducements were offered to players to circumvent the salary cap. And it goes on to mention all kinds of things that certainly aren't confirmed as possibilities. Howard, this fascinates me, and you know far more and are far more connected than I am. But even a guy like me hears and is aware of shoe companies offering bigger bonuses for bigger markets. We've heard things about ownerships talking to players and offering them, these owners are big businessmen and maybe they have a company that they know is going to go sky high. Maybe they have a stock tip. There's all kind of plane rides, use of houses. There's all kinds of smoke about outside influences helping getting players to certain markets from ownership. That's the one I really am curious about, because I feel like that's the one the NBA would have to agree completely to go after itself, and I don't know that they'd like what they find.
There's been a long history of this where, possibly going all the way back to Shaq going to LA where, he's going there because he wants to be near Hollywood. Well, okay. Well, did the Lakers actually say we'll set you up with some folks in Hollywood to pursue your movie career and all, and people in the music business to pursue your rap career and all this other stuff? Like, there's been stuff about that forever. People going to the Bay Area, joining the Warriors, who said, "Well, I've got an interest in venture capitalism and being a venture capitalist and ways to invest my money." And now the owners can hook you up with their buddies in venture capital. Like, there's always going to be that stuff. The shoe company stuff is completely legal. Like, the shoe companies can write any incentives into their contracts they want to with players. But it's when teams are acting and saying, we will set you up with our buddies, our business partners or whatever to make you even more money, that's where you get into salary cap circumvention. And I want to actually make one clarification here on your show since you brought this up. My understanding, and I made a call this morning just to try to clarify what was going on with this investigation. I think things have gotten a little bit hazy here. The NBA is absolutely investigating the cap circumvention concerns. Sure. The allegations that somebody in Kawhi's camp asked for other financial or non-financial inducements from teams. There is an active investigation about, and not just that one, not just Kawhi's camp, others as well. There's an active investigation to look into cap circumvention with outside incentives that were being offered or asked for. My understanding is there is not necessarily an active investigation going on with regard to the tampering stuff, the discussions that came in advance of June 30th. Now, there is a lot of discussion going on, period, about the rules, the enforceability of the rules, and whether they need to change the rules or maybe just decide that the rules are unenforceable. That's an active discussion going on, and there may actually, there's a possibility of investigations into all of that as well. My understanding is there is no active investigation into anybody tampering, and I would also just tell you in general, I don't expect there to be a single tampering violation acted on, disciplined for, because again, all 30 teams are going to be guilty, and so what's the NBA going to do? Just fine everybody? I mean, I don't want to make a prediction,
sure,
but I would be absolutely shocked, Dave, if any team is disciplined for tampering as a result of the discussions going on right now. But the investigation, that big I word, is about cap circumvention, not tampering.
Do you think maybe, to your point, maybe the heaviest hand the NBA could do when it comes to tampering is an Adam Silver, kind of an internal, cut it out, these are the rules, and everyone has amnesty till now, but be forewarned, we're going to start enforcing X, Y, and Z. Do you think that's about as far as, and I'm not asking you to predict, but is that even realistic?
I think that maybe it will be a combination of things. I think there could be some combination of Adam Silver and league lawyers saying, here's a reiteration of what the rules are that you all bought into and that you all presumably, promised to adhere to. There could be, the sternly worded reminder kind of thing. But I think more important than that is the broader discussion among the Board of Governors, the 30 owners, about what they actually want this league to, how this league should actually operate when it comes to signing and pursuing and recruiting free agents. Do we have rules or don't we? Are we either going to adhere to them or we're not? Do we need to reform these rules in some way? Do we need to hold each other accountable in some other way? I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, I think it's a really difficult conversation and a difficult solution to find, to be honest, because it still relies to a certain extent on just kind of trust, on just believing that, well, if we act better, if we hold ourselves to account and decide not to have these conversations with free agents illegally on June 15th, then nobody else will either. But the second you don't trust anybody else to do it, you're going to do it too. And, people mocked Mitch Kupchak during his latter years with the Lakers because it was reported that Mitch was the only one, one of the only ones, who still followed the rules.
Yep.
And it was to his detriment and to the Lakers' detriment. So that's a real problem.
Howard Beck of Bleacher Report joining us as we wrap up. Howard, I can't let you escape Sacramento radio without at least asking a question about the Kings. They let Willie Cauley-Stein go. They re-signed Harrison Barnes. They grabbed Dwayne Dedmon, Rashawn Holmes, Corey Joseph. And I've read and I've seen, and I tend to agree with it, that maybe their biggest acquisition is time and development for this young core. How did you feel about their offseason, and what are your initial thoughts going into October?
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough in a Western Conference where all these teams made these massive splashes, and both LA teams, got really strong, and are obviously, those two are now definite contenders, maybe the two favorites. Utah got stronger. Denver is just a young team that has so much depth that as they evolve, they just get stronger by internal growth primarily. And so it's hard for the Kings or a lot of these other teams to really make a dent without having landed some big splashy free agent or a trade, and that's harder for certain markets. But I think what you said is accurate and is the right way to think about it. And besides that, depending on the team, sometimes patience is your best ally anyway, and I think that's the case for the Kings because you've got this budding star in De'Aaron Fox, and you've got this solid young backcourt and this nice core, and then Marvin Bagley, prior to the injury, was having a really nice rookie season. And I think bringing back Harrison Barnes was the right move. And, I like the Trevor Ariza pickup. I like the Corey Joseph pickup. I think the front court, or at least at the center position, maybe is a little bit of a concern with Cauley-Stein gone, but obviously he didn't want to be there. And so, all right, that's fine. Like, you can't fight that one. Did they do enough with Dedmon and Holmes? I mean, we'll see. But I also think that in a league where teams are playing small a lot, and you can put Bagley there, and you've got Harry Giles, you've got other options. I like the makeup of their team. I like the direction they're going. Are they going to be? I think that the Kings' best case scenario is they're competing for one of those last two playoff spots. But I think there's like 5 teams at least competing for the 7th and 8th spots, and so that's the challenge. Can they break through? I don't know. I'm still waiting to see. I don't know what to think about the Warriors. I think the Warriors are a fringe playoff team, honestly. I think there's a chance the Warriors miss the playoffs. That's an unpopular opinion, and I may be proven profoundly incorrect, but I think that there's a chance they miss. I think the Spurs could fall out. I think the Thunder are at least in the mix right now as long as Chris Paul's on the roster, but we don't know how long he's staying on the roster and what they'll look like if and when they trade him. The Pelicans are another team that, like the Kings, I think are young and interesting, and their best case scenario is competing for one of those last playoff spots. So, but I think the Kings are on the right course, and I think they've taken a good patient route and should just kind of stay the course and wait for and see whether there's that moment, that opportunity to make a more dramatic move, and otherwise just be patient with the guys you've got, let them develop.
UC Davis's own REM fan and senior NBA writer at Bleacher Report, Howard Beck. Follow him online, Howard Beck, just as it's spelled. He will be out in Sacramento soon. Autograph signing, if there is one, we will let you know all the details at the Galleria or wherever he will hang out. Howard, always great to be with you, my man.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Go Ags.
Go Ags. Take care. That's Howard Beck.
The Drive.